Yes, my name is Andy Gray. I'm an ex-footballer, played for 17 years in England at various clubs and was at Sky Sports for 20 years, and now I work for talkSPORT radio station. Oh, that's a very good question. My earliest recollection. I guess my earliest recollection would be when African footballers started to influence the Premier League. And it was probably a natural progression, because Africa had always been a place that had been, I think, untapped. Certainly when I played football, it was a place that it was almost like a pot of gold waiting to be found. And I think teams, when the Premier League started to think, well, where do we go to look for this new talent? And lots of people said, Africa. Let's go try there. And probably in the first few years of the Premier League, that was when I first saw some African players come into the league, and then more and more. And every time a player from a new place in the world, new continent, a new country comes in and is successful, people go, wow, where did you get him from? And then other people go there. And it's no surprise when you see the size of the nation and the continent that Africa is, that people have gone there and tried to find this huge abundance of talent that's there. And I think it's been good, not just for African players, but it's been great for world football that it's integrated in there. I was unlucky in respect that I retired in 1989, which is a long time ago, probably long before you were born in many ways. So I was unfortunate that I didn't play. When I finished in England, England was still a place that didn't have many foreign footballers, let alone African footballers. It was a place where the foreigners was me, a Scot, or an Irishman, or a Welshman. Those were the majority of the foreigners who played in the English League then. And as I've said, I think that it was only with the formation of the Premier League, when people started to spread their net a lot wider, that African footballers started to come into England in big numbers. Well, of course, I think they have. I mean, I was playing in the 70s and 80s, so I was very aware of the tough times black English footballers were having. I mean, I was very good friends with, still am, with Cyril Regis and Brendan Batson and Laurie Cunningham, who were at West Bromwich Albion. They were very high-profile black English footballers. And because I played in Birmingham as well, I knew the lads fairly well. So I knew the problems that were around English football at that time. And those lads helped enormously. But in fairness, if you're sort of isolated, if there's only a few of you, it's much more difficult to have a voice. And I think the more black players that came into the English game, the bigger the voice was, the more responsible people had to be. And I actually think, in fairness to English football, it's probably done more to get racism out the game than any other nation that I can think of. We've worked really hard in this country to erase racism. Yes, you're going to get the odd flash somewhere, as we saw last year with the John Terry and the Suarez episodes. You're going to get that. That will happen occasionally. But I think that the English Premier League can be very happy that, yes, African players have helped, because so many have come into this country and embraced the football, and we've embraced them. Someone asked me that in 1990, after Cameroon had done so well. And I thought that African football then it had the wonderful footballers. I mean, the excitement of Roger Mila and everything that went around him. I don't know what age he was when he was playing, but he was a good age. But the excitement that went around then and what they could do. People were saying an African team, an African nation can win the World Cup soon. I didn't think it could, because although I thought the African players were hugely talented, they lacked a little bit of discipline, organisation, know-how at that level. But I do think every World Cup that goes by, Africa is getting closer and closer to providing a World Cup finalist, first and foremost. And then I think, I wondered in my lifetime if I would see an African side contest that World Cup final and possibly win it. I wasn't sure 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm sure now that I will see an African nation definitely contest the final. Whether they win it will be another thing, but I think we'll see one in it. I love it. I love the fact that, as you say, it's risen from 4 to 30 and over the 20 years of the Premier League. It actually should be more. I'm actually surprised it's only 30. I actually think with the size of the nation we're talking about, that, but what we have to remember, there's the Italian League, there's the German League, there's La Liga, there's the French League, and many African footballers are playing in those leagues. So I think that over the whole of Europe, you'll find there's a massive amount of African players playing, but I think they have been good for the league. I really do believe that. Anyone who comes into the league and improves their league in this country, I think it can only be a good thing for the league, and I think everyone's embraced that. No, I don't. That's one of the reasons I thought they would have trouble in the World Cups, and why they did in the early years not do as well, because I think that the tactical nous is now there, the tactical knowledge is now there. They've had many coaches coming in from abroad, from Brazil and all sorts of countries to go and coach over in Africa. I think that's helped African football. And I did think they were maybe not as disciplined as Europeans or South Americans, not tactically aware as they were. I think it was one of these, it was almost like watching an African side in the late 80s, early 90s. It was like watching a game at a school. You throw the ball on the pitch and you see all these great talented players, huge talent, fantastic ability, but you just knew that in the end they would probably be beaten by a side that knew more about the game and was more disciplined than them. But they've definitely learned that, and I think that's what the European leagues have given to African football. They've taught these players tactical awareness. They've taught these players discipline is important, and I think that the African nations have embraced that as well. Wow, that's a big question. When you mentioned people like JJ Okocha, what a talent. He fantastic. Lucas Radebe, who at Leeds United, they think the world of him still. Because we concentrate mainly in the Premier League in this country, obviously my focus is pretty much on that as much as anything. You know, I think that I loved, when Michael Essien came to Chelsea, I loved Michael. I mean, he was a bull of a footballer. Talented, but hard as nails. And I thought, this is the kind of guy you want, when you go to war, you want Michael Essien stood beside you, you know. But then, as I've said, I think that for me, my favourite footballer, certainly in this country, has been Didier. I think that the way he's gone about it, because that's what we focus most of our stuff on, and most of my knowledge is about the players basically in this country. But listen, you could go through every league, as I've said, into La Liga, into the Bundesliga, into La Liga, you know, Serie A, and you'll find African football is having an influence all over Europe, and I think it should be proud of that. I honestly think that, for me, I was a striker. I love to score goals. So, you know, when somebody like Didier Drogba comes into, and he was like me, I was regarded, although he's bigger than me, I was regarded like Didier as a front man who was powerful, who beat people up and headed lots of goals. So I'm always drawn towards those kind of players. So I think that it would have to be Drogba. I think his contribution, not only to make British football, the league, better, but for Chelsea, during the period where Chelsea came from nowhere really to win titles, and then it culminated in Didier's final kick for Chelsea as a footballer when he scores the winning penalty in the Champions League this year. So I think his contribution to the game, and as I've said, he's a frustrating man to watch, but you speak to all the Chelsea people who worked with him, and I spoke to Frank Lampard recently, and he said he's really going to miss Didier because he felt he was just awesome. When he played and when he was at it, as we say in football, Didier was just unplayable. No one could cope with him. So I think he's made a huge contribution to Chelsea and to British football. The African nations play with a freedom still, that I think that a lot of European countries don't play with. You know, the Ghanaian side that went so close at this last World Cup, it still had a freedom about it. You know, Asamoah Gyan, the way he plays his football, we saw it at Sunderland when he was there for a brief spell. You know, he just plays with the freedom, as if he's out in the street playing with his kids. And they still have that about them that not a lot of European sides have. But they've combined that with an organisation, with tactical know-how, and with a discipline that they probably didn't have 20 years ago. So they're very much aware of the things you need to do, but they haven't lost that ability to be themselves, you know, to be individual. I still think they have, there's that, they can be an individual in a team, in an African team, and sometimes in a European side you can't be. You have to do it for the team. But I still think the African nations like to see that bit of individuality. Somebody who does something, like, wow, and gets you off your seat. So I still think they have that. Whew. What have they gone? It's a difficult one. Again, it's a difficult, quite a good question, but it's a difficult one to answer. What have they contributed? 20 years ago, as we said, there were 4 African footballers in this country. They've contributed knowledge. We now understand the African player better than we ever did. They've helped with us combating racism in this country. Professionally, they've given teams, again, that individuality that you know, the early ones, like you mentioned, JJ Okocha. What a footballer. What a footballer. I mean, how Bolton never got him is beyond us all. Sam Allardyce, you know, he made a magical signing in JJ to take him there. And he kind of lit the fuse, and he was such an individual footballer. You just gave him the ball. Sometimes you never got it back again for 2 or 3 minutes because he loved it that much. And you get others like Michael Essien, who we've talked about, Salomon Kalou, and you know, these people who have come in and they've given, what have they given English football? They've given English football knowledge, ability, players who, you know, football's not the be-all and end-all for their lives. You know, they kind of swagger around a bit and say, yeah, well, if it didn't happen for me today, it'll happen for me next week. But they've contributed such a lot in many ways to the English game.